What's going on, everybody? Daniel Worthy here, and yesterday Microsoft held an online conference called Connect, and they had a really awesome announcement that came out of it, and it was Visual Studio 2013 has a new edition called Community Edition. Now what this is a version of Visual Studio that is 100% free. This is a huge deal considering Visual Studio cost upwards of $1,000, or it was included in an MSDN subscription that was pretty pricey. Now Microsoft is doing this to encourage open source development, and it's also encouraging students, teachers, and small business people to start using their tools. They plan on recovering any sort of cost with MSDN subscriptions and other items in other ways. Some other big announcements that came out of this Microsoft Connect conference was .NET running on OS X and Linux. This is kind of a big deal considering .NET's been very specific to the Windows platform, and it's kind of gotten a bad reputation, but it sounds like they're starting to move towards what Oracle's done with Java. So what I wanted to do today is give a quick overview of what Visual Studio Community Edition is, and get you started on a very basic website template. I've spent about an hour or two looking at the Community Edition, and as far as I can tell, there are no differences between it and Visual Studio Professional, which is what I use at work. This is awesome because in the past the free editions of Visual Studio were called Express. Now, these were slimmed down versions of Visual Studio. You would have to download Visual Studio Express for web if you wanted to do web projects, or Visual Studio for Windows if you wanted to do like Windows Phone or Windows RT development. With Community Edition, it's all bundled into one. So let's just go ahead and look at the tool itself. And if you're not familiar with Visual Studio, we have our main window here. This is typically where our code is going to live on our right hand side, and this may change depending on how you lay out your windows, but is your Solution Explorer. This is a File Explorer. And then on the bottom here by default, you're going to have your output window. This is going to, well, you can't see it because my head is the output window. This is what lets you know if you have compilation errors or whether a build succeeded or failed. Now, let's look at one of the big features with Visual Studio Community Edition that wasn't in the Express editions. Well, it was, but it wasn't as flushed out. The extensions and updates, so if you go up to Tools and go down to Extensions and Updates, I already have a large number of extensions installed, but what these do is essentially enhance your Visual Studio experience. I'm very fond of a tool called Vim, and I have an extension that allows for keyboard navigation and it's called VisVim or VSVim. There are also Visual Studio Web Essentials, Web Essentials for 2013. This allows for less compilation, grunt tasks, and a bunch of other extremely nifty tools. What else do I have? I have a bunch of tools for Windows Phone and Windows RT development and templating items. Anyway, so that's that. Also, a cool feature that wasn't in Visual Studio 2012 that's a part of 2013 that is extremely useful is that it ties to your live account, so it saves your shortcut commands and Windows layouts. Now, so that's kind of your general layout of Visual Studio itself. So let's just go ahead and create our first web project. So to create a web project, you're going to go up to the top left-hand corner and click File, and you may think to do New Website. Now, if you're wanting to do something with the .NET MVC framework, this isn't the choice you want to make. A website is typically best for a directory structure of plain HTML and stuff. So select New Project, or you can press Control-Shift-N, and it's going to bring up a dialog with various templates. And so at the root level, it's going to group them out based on language. So we have Visual Basic, C#, C++, F#. They have some JavaScript ones in here. So the JavaScript ones are essentially Windows Store apps, it looks like, and there's even some Python in there. So what I'm going to do, I want to do a C# MVC application. And so if we drill down to C#, we have Store apps, Windows Desktop apps, which would include a class library or a WPF application. Then they also have some cloud apps, reporting Silverlight, which is still relevant despite what a lot of people say, and WCF. So we're going to select Web and select ASP.NET Web Application. This is relatively new to Visual Studio 2013 and .NET 4.5. In the past, this is where you would select .NET MVC. So I'm just going to name it Web Application 2 because I tested this and hopefully everything goes right. And I'm going to click OK. Now we're going to be presented with a dialog, and this is where you cherry pick what features and functions you want. Now I'm going to by default select MVC, and what this is going to do is the main layout of our solution is going to be related to .NET MVC. And then I'm also going to select, so from here we can say we want the web forms or web API, and in this instance we don't really need those. And I'm going to make sure to leave unit tests unchecked because we don't need those for this. I'm going to uncheck host in the cloud because we're just going to run this locally. And then there's also an option to change authentication. This is pretty cool if you're wanting to do Windows-based authentication or your organization authentication. I'm just going to leave it on user accounts and just kind of show you some of the features with that. So yeah, I'm going to host it. Oh, it's irrelevant, but I would host it as a website if I did. And then I'm going to click OK. Now behind the scenes this is going to create all the file structure and everything we need for a web project. It's going to take a second to load. And the project actually includes a README file. This is extremely handy if you're new to .NET MVC and you're not overly familiar with it. I'm going to auto hide the output window because it's not always relevant. So if you aren't familiar with ASP.NET applications, this would be a good place to start and kind of poke around and see what's going on and how to do various things. So the first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to build my application. So you can either do Control B or, well, never mind, it doesn't have my shortcut plugged in. So if you go up to your top menu and select Build and Build Solution, which is Control Shift B, it's going to build all of your projects in your solution, and through our output window we see it's succeeded. To run this, we're going to be using what's called IIS Express. IIS is typically the Windows server application similar to the LAMP stack. And so to run this, we're going to just click our play button up here, and that says, for instance me, since Google Chrome's my default browser, it's going to launch in there and it's going to load up in another window. And our web address for this is localhost port 61899. Now that's going to change based off of on where really it's pretty much randomly assigned whenever you start your server. So we get a nice, elegant, simple website pre-built for us through the template. You'll see we have a register and a login link, and we have a home, about, contact, and so if we navigate through there, it's pretty plain Jane. One thing you'll notice is if we shrink our screen, we notice it's responsive. Visual Studio includes a framework called Bootstrap, which is a mobile first responsive framework, which I plan on doing a video fairly soon on. And so kind of exploring our app, what I'm going to do is to kind of show off some of the built-in features that they include for you is I'm going to register an account. Now what this is going to do is actually going to tie into an actual database. And so it's going to require an email and a password, and so I'm going to cause some invalid state here. So I'm going to do Daniel at nothing, which would be an invalid email address, and just dump a random password in there. I'm going to click register, and there was no post back. Everything was done on the client side, which is typically desired. You don't want the screen to refresh for something simple like this. It tells me my email address is invalid and that the password and my password confirmation don't match. So I'm going to fix my email address and then give myself a password that matches. I think that matches. And it's going to tell me passwords must have at least one. It's going to give me the rules, essentially. I believe that was a post back because the rules are on the server side. So let me give it a password that matches the rules. Ooh, boo. Okay. Alright, I think that works this time. Okay, so we now have a post back, or at least loading a post back. And what Visual Studio is doing behind the scenes is creating a local instance of your database. So if we go into our Solution Explorer, we're going to stop running the application and click this red square, which is a typical symbol for stop. I believe now our web application is no longer valid because it's not running the server anymore. But if inside of your Solution Explorer, there is an app_data folder. I'm going to refresh it and show hidden items, and you'll see that there is a MDF file. Now this is a database file essentially, and what's inside of this file is all of our tables. So if you double click on it, you can open up and browse through it, and so we see, I think I can actually view data inside Visual Studio. Typically I use SQL Server Management Studio for this, and so okay, so that's showing query. It's showing our data model inside of here, so we could modify it and all that stuff if we wanted to. So I'm going to do a new query on the table and see what we can actually do here. Star from ASP net users. I'm going to press F5 to run. Oh, that's what happens when you're used to Management Studio instead of .NET. You press F5 to execute a query, and it doesn't work that way. That's okay. We'll look back in the app later. So if we execute our query, we see that my username is in there, and we have a password hash and a security stamp and a bunch of extra nonsense. So now what you would do in a typical scenario is your database connection is stored inside your web config. This is kind of I believe in other programming languages this would be similar to an INI file. Web.config file is an XML driven file that contains all of your framework references, your database connection strings, application settings, and other stuff like that. So I'm going to zoom in a little bit so you can see it. And so we can see that we have a connection strings node, a default connection, and if we scroll to the right, we see this big long web application 2.mdf. So what we would do is we would replace this line with a connection that would actually point to an actual database server when we'd be ready to look to moving this to publishing it to the web. Now, so in terms of grand scale of things, that's how you set up and run your Visual Studio projects. There's a few other small things I want to show you before we call it quits. While running our Visual Studio website, you'll notice in the bottom left-hand corner, you'll notice this little bar. This is included with Web Essentials, and it's a really great feature. called Browser Link. I think it's called Browser Link. Now what it allows you to do is live inspect and live edit changes inside of your HTML and CSS and JavaScript. So what I've done is I've clicked on the inspect button. I'm going to click on this paragraph node, and then I'm going to essentially tab over to my Visual Studio. You'll notice that it's highlighted the actual tab there, or the actual paragraph tag. I'm going to go back and do the same thing but for the header, and it's going to crawl our file, and I can't see what exactly is highlighted, so it should be application name, which is this right here. It's highlighted already, so it's kind of hard to tell. So anyway, it's a nice little web inspector. One other pretty cool feature with it is that you can make edits inside of your CSS. So what I'm going to do here is I'm going to make an edit to my CSS, save, and then Alt-Tab over to the browser. I'm not going to refresh the browser or anything. This is all going to happen automatically, or what some people would say automagically, which is just silly. So I'm gonna split screen it, and so I'm gonna do background pound FF0000, which is red, and I'm gonna save, and it didn't do it. That's just great. So what should happen is this screen's supposed to turn red. Oh, it's because I'm no longer debugging. That'll do it. Since the web server wasn't running, it wasn't allowing it to run. So let's try this again. So I'm going to do, I should just be able to paste it. Well, I overwrote it. Okay. Background pound FF000000, and it's even doing it before I save. So this is really great for a front-end developer if you're looking at wanting to quickly and effectively update on the fly. There's other features within this of, oh, there's auto syncing to it that'll do it too. Oh, okay, that's fun. You can track your unused CSS, do a bunch of pretty nifty stuff. They have a goal of integrating with the various browser tools, where if you go into your F12 tools and modify something here, so let's say I set this to black, and then click save. Let's see what happens. It didn't save, but that's okay. Ideally, the goal would be to have your F12 changes migrate into your Visual Studio changes also. Doesn't look like it's exactly there yet. I may be missing some, but you know, that's okay. So anyway, that sums up your first very basic MVC web application. I'm going to leave it to you guys to dive in a little bit deeper to learn the ins and outs, but this is what you need to do to get set up and running. I believe I'm a pretty firm believer in diving in on your own and making your own mistakes and learning how to do it. So I don't want to take up too much more of your time. If you want to pick up the Visual Studio Community Edition, pretty much just Google Visual Studio Community Edition and it should be the first link. If you get a chance, watch this video. The introduction to it is by Scott Hanselman, who is one of the developer evangelists for Microsoft. Really great speaker. And so just click on that link, download Visual Studio 2013 Community Edition, and get going. The tool is really great. This is really bringing Microsoft forward in terms of open source. They open sourced .NET MVC and India framework about a year or 2 years ago, but they've just made kind of that final giant leap. They've had as a .NET developer, we're typically given a hard time by other open source developers, and this really is probably the best thing that Microsoft has done for open source development. You're able to do just about everything now inside of Visual Studio, between cross-platform phone apps, cross-platform web apps. Pretty soon we'll be able to write cross-platform desktop apps. Some really great stuff. And so if you haven't had the opportunity to test out Visual Studio, or really even experiment with writing web apps using the .NET framework, now's a great time to check it out. So anyway, thank you for the watch. I'm going to try to have a few more video series up in the coming months, and we will see you on the next one.